Let's talk about why spelling matters. To be honest, for a lot of the history of the English language, spelling didn't matter. People spelled the same word in different ways, and that was fine. Sometimes even great writers would spell the same word a few different ways in the same paragraph, because at that time, spelling just didn't make any difference. It wasn't part of culture. A few of the very elite English British courts tried to standardize spelling, and it would kind of work, but also kind of not really work. Much later, spelling was standardized, and today we have standardized spelling, but the question is, why should you personally bother with that? Why does it matter to you if you're spelling right or if you're spelling wrong? Take a look at this guy over here. You see somebody who's wearing a suit, and if you looked at that person, you might think this is somebody who seems competent, somebody who seems trustworthy. Whereas if you look at this person over here, it doesn't really seem like this is not a person that inspires confidence and trust. You know, he's wearing a diaper and he's wearing a slightly different diaper on his head. It looks like it's not that this particular style of dress is inherently bad, but the way it's interpreted in culture today is we would look at this person as a laughingstock, and this person as somebody more serious, somebody that commands more respect, somebody that you can trust. And that's really a lot of what spelling is today. Spelling isn't necessarily about being right or wrong the way things are in math. It's more about how do you present yourself. Do you present yourself like this, or do you present yourself like this? When you misspell, it kind of starts to go more in this direction and a little bit less in this direction. Now, look, even today, spelling in English is done differently. It's done differently in America and in Britain. Here are some of those words. You see that words are spelled differently in America and in England. So it's not that there's an inherent right way and an inherent wrong way. It's just that if you spell in the way that's accepted, that's seen as correct, it makes you look more serious, it makes you look more powerful, it's going to command respect. Now, here's an interesting one. What happens if you dress very nicely and you spell incorrectly? This is a picture of former Vice President Dan Quayle. You can see here he's wearing a suit, and most of the time that's what he would be wearing, especially in public. He'd be wearing a nice suit. And once he spelled a word wrong, and that made him basically a national laughingstock for the entire duration of his vice presidency. Basically, he was seen as kind of a laughingstock and an idiot because he spelled a word wrong. Now notice, spelling words are spelled differently right now in America and England, so it's not like there's this massive, inherent, deep, and fundamental truth, but it's basically seen as socially backwards. It's seen as socially weak to do that. Let's take a look at this. This is a picture of one of the greatest soldiers of all time, Napoleon Bonaparte. Legendary military leader, one of the best that the world has ever seen. He, at some point when he was captured and exiled, he basically just got his people together and just did it again. Conquered all kinds of land, conquered countries. And if you dressed like this now, you know, wearing some white tights and this type of a coat, you might look like a bit of a laughingstock. But that's like how people dress then. That's how the most inspiring military leader of the time dressed. Today, a soldier might look like this, and when we look at this soldier, we say, wow, that looks a little bit better. That guy looks kind of cool. You know, he looks all intense and awesome. But that's not what was seen at the time. At the time, this is how the best soldier in the world dressed. And similarly, there was a point in time in the history of the English language where you could spell however you wanted to, and it was seen as fine. But if you do that today, it would be just like if you dressed like Napoleon today. It wouldn't look intense. It would look a little bit ridiculous. Spelling is basically more of a social grace than it is a deep, fundamental academic truth, but it's an important social grace because you're going to be using this all the time. Let's take a look at this. This might be something that a company like ours might send to somebody. I've written here in the top, I spelled it correctly. Dear Ms. Jones, we have noticed that your son is missing some critical skills in arithmetic, and presumably the letter would have continued from there. Now here I spelled it incorrectly. Dear Ms. Jones, we have noticed that your son is missing some critical skills in arithmetic. Now, in both cases, it could be true. In both cases, you have somebody who knows a lot about math that's analyzed the students and says, there's some issues that we see over here. But notice that if somebody got this second letter, if your parents got this letter where their name and a bunch of other things are misspelled, they're not going to take it seriously. They're going to say, this is just nonsense. This person doesn't look like he's gone to school himself. He looks uneducated. In other words, even if you tell the truth, even if you say a fundamental truth, your truth will not be taken as seriously if it's spelled ridiculously. And you might say, well, couldn't I just use spell check? Well, look over here. I have misspelled a lot of words here, but they're not all underlined in red. You know why? Because we is a word. It's like when you're saying we on a roller coaster. Your is also a word, referring to a bygone era. Sun is a word. This is how you spell the kind of sun that's up in the sky. Some, this is a word too. It's spelled correctly. It means when you add to it, it means the result of addition. So spell check isn't going to be super reliable in all cases. The other thing is sometimes in your life you might write something by hand. It might be something very important that you write by hand. Usually if you're writing something by hand, it's something really important, and that's the last place you would want to misspell something. Spelling is a social grace. It's the difference between dressing like this and dressing like this. Not that this way is inherently necessarily bad. In fact, it has some conveniences. Somebody who dresses like this might not need to stop for as many bathroom breaks as someone who dresses like this. But in the end of it, most people are going to take someone who dresses like this a lot more seriously than someone who dresses like this. And that's the key of spelling. It's just like dressing well. It's a social grace. It's going to gain you more respect. And spelling poorly, even if you dress well like this guy, spelling poorly can turn you into a laughingstock. Spelling is one of the most important social graces that you're going to learn at any point in your life.